The destruction of the Death Star was more than a strategic victory. It gave the Rebel Alliance something rare: time and hope. With the Empire in shock, due to the recent event that eliminated much of its war power, the rebels were able to reorganize, spread influence, and, above all, invest in science and technology. Bases previously hidden in caves now have advanced laboratories. Former defected Imperial engineers, attracted to the rebel cause, contributed knowledge and innovation. For the first time, the rebellion had room to dream of changing the course of the war with ideas, not just weapons. Among the most daring inventions was a structure called the Ring of Dawn, a temporal experiment that united quantum physics, hyperdrive, and technology recovered from ancient ruins. The aim was clear: to send a single person into the past with the chance to interfere in the course of history. The idea seemed fanciful, but the tests showed something disturbing. The energy accumulated in the machine could not only open a time rift, but also keep the traveler's consciousness and body intact. It was, in theory, a key to redesigning the galaxy. If we can prevent the birth of the Empire, the war will never happen, explained the chief scientist. But only a consciousness strong enough will survive the crossing. The machine was unstable, and time travel required not only a resistant body, but a mind of absolute balance. Willpower is everything, muttered the technicians. The rebellion didn't just need a warrior. It needed someone who carried enough light not to get lost in the darkness of time. Hundreds of volunteers came forward. Pilots, soldiers, and leaders. They all failed. The time waves rejected them. Some came back unconscious. Others didn't come back at all. It was by chance, in a routine examination, that they discovered something in Leia Organa. The Princess of Alderaan, born of royalty and forged by war, possessed a unique energy. Her data emitted spikes in patterns never seen before. The rebellion scientists didn't know exactly, but the midichlorian count in her body was exceptional. That's why she was perfect for the job. And so Leia was prepared. She learned everything she was supposed to say and do. She was instructed not to interfere more than necessary. Her mission was to carry a message, to warn the Jedi, to alert the Republic, to prevent the Emperor from taking control. A speech had been rehearsed dozens of times. She knew there was only one chance. If she failed, everything they had achieved could be erased like space dust. Luke offered to go, of course, but his presence was necessary in the present. He had become a symbol, the hero who had destroyed the Death Star. His disappearance could shake the hope that was now flourishing in so many planetary systems. It was with a heavy heart that he said to Leia, "Victory begins with a seed in the past. You will be that seed." She didn't reply. She just held the data disk with the message and nodded. The firing of the machine was silent. No sound, no explosive light, just a dense vibration in the air and, suddenly, emptiness. Leia felt like she was floating for an eternal moment through the fabric of reality. When she opened her eyes, she realized she was in a place that no longer existed, at least not with so much life. The towers of Coruscant stood around her, magnificent, organized, and full of life. It was a different time. The city was not yet dominated by the Empire. So this is the past, she thought, watching the ships of the Republic crossing the skies with elegance. Everything seemed cleaner, more prosperous, but also strange. The streets were full of clones patrolling, still unsuspecting. There was no fear, but there was tension. Order 66 had not yet been given. She could feel it in the air, as if history was about to break. The future was still just a shadow. Leia followed the signs to the Jedi Temple, which stood like a fortress of wisdom and silence. As she approached, guards stopped her, but the serenity in her gaze made them call a master to attend to her. "I need to speak to Obi-Wan Kenobi," she said, trying to remain firm. A young Jedi Knight approached, his gaze intense and his presence striking. "I'm Anakin Skywalker. May I help you?" Leia was paralyzed. The name echoed inside her like thunder. "Skywalker?" She repeated it mentally, swallowing. There was something strange about that man. Something familiar and, at the same time, dangerous. Her mind spun, trying to connect the facts. Could it be? No, that was impossible. But the surname, Luke was also Skywalker. Could he be your father? Doubt struck her and she was very excited about it. But she didn't say anything to the former Skywalker and asked to speak to Master Obi-Wan. Leia and Anakin walked through the corridors of the Jedi Temple, each step bringing with it the gravity of the situation. She, with her firm posture, tried to keep a calm countenance, but internally the tension was growing. It wasn't just a mission, it was a risk that carried the hope of the entire galaxy. Anakin, on the other hand, watched her curiously. He wasn't sure what to expect from her, but he sensed that there was something different. "You're a messenger, aren't you?" he asked, his voice deep. "Of great importance, Mr. Skywalker," Leia replied, with the confidence of someone who carried the truth in her chest. "And what do you need from Obi-Wan?" he continued, without hiding his interest. "There's something much bigger at stake," she replied, her eyes shining with seriousness. Anakin remained silent for a moment, studying the young woman before him. Her eyes somehow reminded him of Padme. The way she moved, the way she spoke, even the tone in her voice. "You look like someone I know," he said softly, almost as if he were talking to himself. Leia watched him carefully. There was no doubt she reminded him of Padme. But he soon remembered the nightmares, of Padme's death, of the pain he felt at her loss. The weight of his nightmares grew heavier and heavier, and it made him mentally pull back a little. "I'm sorry, I'm just remembering someone," he mumbled, trying to pull himself together. The two of them entered the Jedi Temple and headed towards the room where Obi-Wan Kenobi was waiting. The silent walk was marked by the sound of footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. As Leia walked alongside Anakin, she couldn't help but notice her surroundings. The Jedi Temple, so imposing and vast, seemed more alive than ever. She felt that her mission was about to change the course of history. When they finally reached the room, Obi-Wan was standing there, his back to them, examining some files. As she turned, Leia felt a shock. He was so young, so strong, more imposing than she had ever imagined. She hadn't lived with the old Ben Kenobi, but she had heard Luke's stories and was amazed by him at his best. Obi-Wan looked at Leia, his eyes penetrating, as if he wanted to understand everything behind her. Leia, for her part, had no doubt that he was her last hope. "Master Obi-Wan," Leia began, her voice calm and determined. "I come from the future." Anakin took a step back, surprised. "From the future?" Obi-Wan asked, arching an eyebrow suspiciously. Leia knew this would be the hardest part. She prepared to speak, and in her mind, the words were clear. "Yes, Master, the future is not good. The Empire rises, and the Republic falls." She looked directly into Obi-Wan's eyes. "The Senate will fall and the Empire will be built by a Sith, and you can't let that happen." The two generals in the room exchanged suspicious glances. "That's very hard to believe," said one of them skeptically. "Where's the evidence?" asked the other, crossing his arms. Leia, for her part, was ready. "I know what happened and what's coming. The Chancellor, he's not who he seems. He's a Sith, and he manipulates everything and everyone to seize power." The room fell silent. Anakin, who had initially been skeptical, now looked at her more closely. The tension in the air was palpable. Leia continued, "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I'm going to tell you everything I know. The future depends on it." Obi-Wan, now more serious, listened attentively. "Go on, Leia," he said, his voice low but with a quiet strength. "The clones, they will be programmed to follow an order without question. Order 66. And when it is given, they will turn against the Jedi without hesitation," Leia explained. That's impossible," Anakin said, trying to understand. "But it's the truth," Leia affirmed. "I saw it. I've seen everything. I saw how the Empire rises and the Jedi are destroyed, falling before the very soldiers who were once their allies." Her eyes were filled with grief. "But you Jedi are the only hope I have." Obi-Wan remained silent, reflecting on Leia's words. Anakin, however, seemed more troubled than ever. His mind was full of doubts. "Do you know who helped the rise of the Empire?" he asked, with a tone of voice that betrayed his own anguish. Leia hesitated for a moment, but then spoke. I don't have all the details, but I do know that a Jedi, one of the strongest in the Republic, was seduced by promises to save someone he loved. Anakin swallowed. He felt a wave of pain and fear wash over him, but said nothing. Leia continued. He was taken to the dark side, and without him, the Empire would not have been able to consolidate its power. I need to know more, said Obi-Wan, his expression still serious, but now filled with a deeper understanding. But for now, I trust you, Leia, he said, softening his tone a little. And I also trust Anakin. Anakin's name was like a weight in the air. Leia wasn't sure what was happening, but she sensed that there was a connection that went beyond the simple mission. Leia knew that her mission was coming to an end. She said goodbye to Obi-Wan and Anakin, with a deep look, and said, Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You are my only hope. Anakin, in silence, watched her from a distance. The mission is not over, Leia. We can't allow the future to be written like this, said Obi-Wan with tense calm. She smiled slightly, her expression grave. I know, but I've done all I can, she replied. And with a swift movement, she disappeared, returning to the future, leaving the Jedi and the generals to reflect on everything she had said. Leia's figure disappeared into thin air like an ethereal memory, leaving behind a silence full of meaning. Obi-Wan stood still for a moment, his gaze lost in the void. What do you make of all this, Anakin? He asked at last. Anakin crossed his arms and looked away. She knew things, too much to be a fake. Obi-Wan nodded slowly, and she spoke with truth in her heart. The older Jedi looked uneasy. If what she said is real, then the war hasn't even really started yet. You heard what she said, Obi-Wan. A Jedi, someone from here, is going to betray the Order. Anakin spoke quietly, almost to himself. And she mentioned promises. Something about saving a loved one. The memory of what Palpatine had told him during the rescue, the power to save lives that the Jedi hid, came back strongly. He told me not to hesitate, to end Dooku without mercy. Anakin frowned, remembering the words whispered like poison, but he decided to keep it to himself. For now, he would keep the conflict quiet. Hours later, the Jedi Temple called an emergency meeting. The upper chamber was filled with the most powerful masters in the galaxy. Obi-Wan sat next to Yoda and Mace Windu. Anakin, still a knight, was allowed to speak at Obi-Wan's insistence. A woman has appeared with a message from the future, he began. She claims that the Chancellor is a Sith Lord and that he will manipulate everything to exterminate the Jedi. Silence fell like lightning. Windu arched an eyebrow. And why should we believe that? Her presence was real, said Obi-Wan firmly. The Force flowed through her as if guided by something greater. Yoda narrowed his eyes and murmured, Wisdom she brought, but also fear, great fear. Anakin stood up abruptly. She gave us details. Order 66, program soldiers, betrayal. Are we going to ignore all that? The tension in the room made Mace Windu cross his arms. What if it's a trap? An illusion by the Sith to divide us internally? She knew too much to be an illusion, exploded Anakin, his voice echoing through the hall. What if we're waiting too long? What if it's too late when we decide to act? Mace Windu eyed the young Jedi suspiciously. You're disturbed, Skywalker. Obi-Wan intervened. Anakin is right to be concerned. We have enough evidence to launch an investigation. Yoda, with a frown, muttered, Investigate, yes, but act in haste, no. Darkness in the Force, it gets bigger and bigger. What do we do with the clones? Asked a younger master. Mace Windu replied, We must find out if Order 66 is real. If it is, we are surrounded by soldiers programmed to destroy us. Obi-Wan concluded, We need to examine the records of the Kamino factory. Yoda added, We'll find the truth between the lines. Then everyone turned to Anakin again. He was staring at the ground, fighting the anxiety that burned inside him like an uncontrollable fire. Skywalker, you seem to know more than you're letting on. said Mace with an accusatory tone. Anakin raised his eyes, but kept control. I'm just trying to understand. This message speaks of a Jedi who has been seduced by promises, and I've heard those promises before. Obi-Wan looked at him carefully. By whom, Anakin? It doesn't matter now, he replied, turning away. The atmosphere became tense again, but Yoda just watched in silence, his eyes closed, feeling the waves of the Force around him. Let's focus on the facts, Obi-Wan said at last. We need to investigate Palpatine carefully. If he really is a Sith, we need to act before it's too late. Yoda nodded slowly. Stealth, our way must be. Open your eyes, it is necessary. Mace still looked suspicious. If the Chancellor really is who she said, we'll have to remove him from power. But this must be done according to the principles of the Order. Obi-Wan and Anakin exchanged a look. The gears were in motion. The Council unanimously decided that 3 actions needed to be taken immediately. Investigate Palpatine, inspect the clones' obedience protocols, and identify potential signs of corruption among the Jedi. Leia's presence and her plea had planted doubts that could no longer be ignored. She said we were her only hope, murmured Obi-Wan. And, for the first time, the weight of each choice seemed even more profound. The galaxy was on the brink of a revelation that would change everything. At the exit of the temple, Obi-Wan walked beside Anakin down the long stone corridor illuminated by the soft light of dusk. You were very agitated during the meeting, Anakin, he said calmly. Anakin didn't reply immediately. His thoughts were still immersed in what he had heard and what he was feeling. Obi-Wan stopped and stared at him. You're exhaling a heavy energy. Breathe. Calm down. Remember your center. Anakin nodded, forcing a smile, but inside the fear still grew. In the silent chamber at the top of the Jedi Temple, Mace Windu and Master Yoda stood in front of the window, watching the flow of ships over Coruscant. Mace's gaze was hard, suspicious, while Yoda maintained the traditional calm of his kind. Something's wrong with Skywalker, muttered Windu, crossing his arms. At the meeting, did you notice what he said? Words that only someone very close to the Chancellor could repeat. Yoda replied without turning his face away. Confused, young Skywalker is. The fear in him strong is. Mace sighed in frustration. I've warned you, Yoda. Ever since they brought that boy in from the desert, I felt instability. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan and Anakin were walking side by side down one of the temple corridors, both still tense. Obi-Wan stopped suddenly and turned to his apprentice. Anakin, I know the Masters, and I know you, after what you said at that meeting, and the way you spoke. You've become a suspect in Mace's eyes. Anakin looked away, uncomfortable. And Yoda? He asked. Obi-Wan replied regretfully. He realized it too, but he doesn't act without thinking. We need to act before others act for us, continued Obi-Wan. If you don't want things to get worse, if you don't want to be seen as the enemy, then tell me the truth, the whole truth. I am your master, but above that, I'm your brother. Anakin hesitated, swallowing. His breathing was heavy. Obi-Wan, if I tell you, everything could change. The master approached, placing his hand on the young man's shoulder. Then let it change. But it has to start now. Anakin looked down, his eyes watering. I've been dreaming about Padme's death, just like I dreamt about my mother dying. And I can't lose her too. Obi-Wan closed his eyes briefly, absorbing what he was hearing. What about the Chancellor? Anakin clenched his fists. He said that through certain knowledge that the Jedi don't accept, even death can be prevented. Obi-Wan muttered, promises. Anakin's voice came out broken. On that ship, when we rescued the Chancellor, he told me I had to kill Dooku, without mercy, without hesitation, and I obeyed. Obi-Wan was astonished. You killed him while unarmed? Anakin nodded with shame, and he praised me for it. He said it was proof of my strength, of my superiority. Obi-Wan, what if I really am that traitor from the future? By now, tears were streaming down the Jedi Knight's face. Obi-Wan held Anakin by the shoulders. You still have a choice, Anakin. You can still turn away from this path. But you must be honest. You need to stop hiding things. Padme, I always knew. I waited for you to tell me. And even now, I don't judge you. But what we do from this moment on will define who you are. Anakin fell to his knees, his head bowed. I don't know if I can. Obi-Wan bent down beside him. Then let's go together, as we always have. The two remained silent for a few moments, feeling the weight of their choices and possible destinies. Obi-Wan, his voice firm, said, We're going undercover. Observe the Chancellor. Stay close to him, but without revealing ourselves. We'll discover the truth with our own eyes. And if there is betrayal, then you will be the one to stop it. Anakin nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. Thank you, Master. Obi-Wan simply replied, No need to thank me. Just don't hide anything else from me. As the two of them walked away down the temple corridor, side by side, Obi-Wan glanced at his apprentice and said, in a low but concerned tone, Today, at the meeting, you were exuding a very heavy energy, Anakin. You need to calm down, or this shadow will swallow you whole. Anakin didn't answer, he just kept walking, his eyes fixed ahead, now more aware that the future of the galaxy was perhaps in his own hands. The weeks passed under the cloak of caution and silence. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker maintained a careful routine, demonstrating their public loyalty to the Senate and the Republic, while behind the scenes they drew ever closer to Chancellor Palpatine. Both knew that the balance of the galaxy was at stake, and that any false step could mean the end not only of the Jedi Order, but of freedom itself in countless star systems. Anakin, for his part, allowed himself to look vulnerable and divided, as if he was about to give in to temptation, which, for Palpatine, was the exact sign that the plan was working. Obi-Wan watched everything, attentive to every nuance, every word, every glance. The disguise was working. Over time, Palpatine became more open with Anakin. He began to invite him to conversations behind closed doors, long walks through the empty corridors of the Senate, private dinners amid holograms of imperial victories and past glories. Each time, he offered crumbs of a different doctrine, a vision of power as liberation, not servitude. Anakin listened to everything, sometimes impressed, sometimes reluctant. The key was to keep him interested long enough for Palpatine to reveal himself fully. Obi-Wan, using small listening devices, listened from afar. It was a dangerous game, but the closer they got to the dark heart, the clearer the way forward became. It was on a silent night, in the Chancellor's private quarters, that the veil fell completely. Palpatine looked at Anakin with a cold smile and said, with frightening tranquility, You no longer have to choose between love and duty. I can give you both. I can teach you to keep the one you love alive. Death no longer needs to be your fear. The Chancellor slowly approached, placed his hand on the Jedi's shoulder and said firmly, All you have to do is accept. Kneel now, become my apprentice, and together we will master the secrets of life and death. I am the Sith Master who will give you unlimited power. The atmosphere was filled with tension. The fate of the galaxy once again depended on a single decision. Anakin looked at him in silence. His eyes flashed for an instant, and for a brief moment Palpatine thought he had won him over. It's all I've ever wanted, murmured the young Jedi Knight, but then his lips curved into a slightly wry smile. But not like this. On the other side of the room, a secret hatch opened and Obi-Wan emerged, activating his lightsaber with an intense blue snap. Chancellor Palpatine, he declared firmly, you are under arrest on charges of treason against the Republic and for being a Sith Lord. Palpatine stepped back, his eyes blazing with fury. Insolent traitors, he shouted as he activated his red-bladed saber, finally revealing himself as Darth Sidious. The battle had begun. Meanwhile, on Kamino, Mace Windu and Master Yoda were walking through the icy tunnels of the cloning center. With access granted by a mysterious contact, they examined files dating back to the creation of the army. It was there that they found hidden records about something called Protocol 66. The recordings revealed that, at the command of a specific authority, The clones would activate a programmed behavior that would cause them to eliminate all Jedi without hesitation. Mace's blood boiled as he realized that this wasn't paranoia. It was the truth. Yoda remained silent for a few minutes, staring at the holograms with tired but sharp eyes. Dark the future has become. Prepared we were not. Mace, on the other hand, was already reaching for his communicator, demanding that the council be alerted immediately. The conspiracy was bigger than they had imagined. The entire army was in the hands of one man, Palpatine. "We must act now," said Windu. "The Jedi Order is at real risk." Yoda nodded, but with deep regret. "Act we must, but wisely, not angrily." The balance between urgency and calm was, as always, a dilemma. Back on Coruscant, the duel between Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Palpatine was taking on epic proportions. Force beams ricocheted off the walls. Lightsabers crossed each other with violence and precision. Palpatine was powerful, and even at a disadvantage, his fury and mastery of the dark side made him an almost invincible opponent. But Anakin now fought with a clean heart. He knew who he was, what he loved, and what he had to protect. Palpatine spun around with his blade in his fists and broke through the Jedi's defenses. To counterattack, Master and Disciple attacked from above and below, from the left and the right, making the Sith retreat little by little. But Sidious didn't give up and used the rays of pure power to attack the two Jedis. Anakin and Obi-Wan jumped behind the platforms to escape the first beams. Then they used their own sabers to absorb them, and so they got closer and closer to the Sith Lord, who seemed to lose energy and youth with each bolt of lightning. He tried to make many other promises to Anakin at this point in search of help, but the young Skywalker looked at his master and knew what to do. When extremely close to the Sith and still absorbing his rays with his saber, Obi-Wan uses his cunning and kicks the Dark Lord between the legs. The Sith Lord feels the extreme pain and the lightning ceases. Anakin seizes the moment to cut his enemy in half, who falls with an expression of extreme pain. "Master, it wasn't exactly the best of ideas, but," said Obi-Wan in response, "but we must use our cunning from time to time." Using the recordings, Palpatine was positively condemned by the Senate in an extraordinary session. The evidence was irrefutable: treason, manipulation, murder, and the attempted extinction of the Jedi. The galaxy celebrated victory, but also faced the painful truth of how close they had come to total collapse. The Jedi Council, now more humble, began a process of reform, seeking greater balance with the people and less political isolation. The Republic, in turn, was reborn under new principles. The Jedi were no longer just warriors, but guardians of knowledge and mediators of peace. The Order was restructured. Obi-Wan received recognition as one of the heroes of the Reconstruction, while Anakin, still young, became a symbol of redemption and inner strength. Padme, safe and at peace, resumed her place in the Senate, now as the leader of a new political generation. The galaxy breathed new air, lighter, fairer. And finally, Princess Leia, the time traveler, opened her eyes and saw a different world. She felt in the Force that something had changed not just in the galaxy, but in the fate of all sentient beings. Wars had been avoided, the destruction of the Jedi Temple had never occurred. She smiled. A new hope had been born. Time had finally bowed to the power of truth, and the light shone again.